Sorry, that was a terrible Christian Harloff. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Collider. Hello. I wish Ray was here. Welcome to Collider Jedi Council, the show here on Collider Video where we just discuss the hell out of Star Wars and all things Star Wars related. And this, our very last Jedi Council of the year. I am Obi-Wan Kenobi. Of course, John Campea here. I'm going to be one of your hosts today. Of course, joining us, one of the other regular members of the council, Mark 2D2, Mr. Mark Ellis. Mark, how you doing?
I'm great, and this is a very special episode of Jedi Council. How unique? Well, the host isn't showing up today. He's in prison. Aladdin bail bonds is waiting to bail him out. Until then, we have a really fun episode planned.
Yeah, and joining, I'm super excited about this for a couple reasons. This is our last episode of Jedi Council of the year. He was also part of our very first trial run of Jedi Council, going way back. Director, filmmaker, he's directed such films as Fanboys, Barely Lethal, which is available on Blu-ray starting very soon, or is it?
It's out now.
It's out now.
On Amazon Prime free?
Right now.
Free?
Mr. Kyle Newman, who I have dubbed Kylo Ren for this episode. So,
Yes.
Kyle, thank you for being here.
Thank you guys for having me. It's good to be back. It's been a little bit, but
Yeah.
Not a fan of all the decisions you made in The Force Awakens, but hey. And I guess is that something that we need to point out is that we will be there will be some Force Awakens spoilers in here because I wasn't part of last week's episode. I was in Virginia. We don't have the internet there yet, but I wanted to make sure that people watching this know we're going to be talking about that movie as well. That if you haven't seen the movie, you probably want to come back and watch this after you've seen it 9 times.
No, that's a great point. We are going to be talking about The Force Awakens here today, and in those discussions, spoilers are going to come up. Now, we're going to go out on a crazy limb and assume that if you are tuning in and watching a Star Wars show here on the internet 2 weeks after Star Wars The Force Awakens opened, you've probably seen the movie already. But Mark raises a great point. If you haven't yet, just add this video to your favorites and come on back a little bit later. Now, we're going to use most of today's show to take your mailbag questions, because every week you guys are constantly sending in mailbag questions, and we're going to spend a lot of today's show just taking those questions from you guys. A lot of them, if not most of them, are about The Force Awakens, as a matter of fact. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about The Force Awakens. Now, I've run into you at 2 screenings of the films, once at the premiere, then once I think you were coming out of your 3rd screening at the AMC Prime.
yes.
Give us your thoughts of The Force Awakens and how you felt about it.
Wow, there's so much to talk about. I mean, I guess it's like any Star Wars film. The first time you watch it, you've already overthought it. I'm sitting there,
That's a great way to put
I'm
it.
into the next scene, but I'm still thinking about the previous scene. And I think I needed that second viewing to really let things be what they are, as opposed to thinking about them and saying, is this what I heard it was going to be? Is this something new? What are the ramifications of this on now when I'm looking back at episode 6? Or what is episode 1? How does that factor into it? They mentioned balance here. So there's all these things going on in your head, and you need that second viewing to really process it. I guess as a big, broad thing, I love the film. I think you do have to wait till we see 8 and 9 to really know. I mean, obviously the big criticisms are, it's a retread. It's a reboot. You know, in a way, it is a pilot for this new era of Star Wars. And Star Wars has always been rhythmic, poetic, symphonic. There's these repeated motifs.
Yeah.
And you do that, you have that repetition to show variation, that Luke does something different than Anakin, and now is it Kylo or Rey, whoever, or both if they're relatives. How do they do things differently? So I think 8 is going to really modify and inform ultimately how 7 is perceived in a lot of ways for the deep Star Wars fans. So I do think that's a big factor. And yes, so there are those things. And yes, we have a super weapon, but guess what? Super weapon's not going to be in episode 8.
Right.
I think we're pretty safe to assume that. And Luke, if he becomes the master, his teaching should be almost contrary to Yoda and Obi-Wan in some way. Attachment might not be a bad thing, since attachment is the thing that unlocked both Anakin and Luke. It deviated Luke's path from the traditional Jedi route, which Obi-Wan and Yoda laid out for him. Attachment is what, by rejecting them, brought him to his place in Return of the Jedi and freeing his father and letting him balance the Force. So attachment might be part of Luke's new education as a master, and Rey might reject that. So I think they need to vary on these old themes. And but as a movie, episode 7 was it fun? Yes. Was it exciting? Yes. Was there adventure? Yes. Did I love Rey, Finn, Kylo, and BB-8 more than any character since 1980? Probably since Yoda. Those are the 4 freshest characters. There's so much heart in Rey. There's so much charisma in Finn. BB-8 is just quirky and lovable, and it reads the first time you see him. You're like, I get it. I like him.
Yeah.
And Kylo Ren is just this villain in progress, as they said, and I think there's something exciting about where he could go now that we know his lineage. So there's so much potential.
Yeah, Kyle, let me ask you, because I've seen the movie 5 times now in a variety of settings. The crowds have been great. What is something that you noticed about the movie, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth time that you saw it, that you just didn't see the first time? Something maybe specific, a specific scene, or maybe just an overall thematic element?
You pick up on like musical notes and musical variations, and I think there's comparable stuff going on with Rey's theme, what's going on with both Luke and Leia and the Force theme. There's things like that. There are all those parallels again too, and it seems like Kylo Ren is similar to every dark side character we've ever seen, where they actually tell the truth when they're in interrogation scenes,
right,
or in one-on-ones, and the Jedi always actually tell lies or fibs or tall tales
from a certain point of view.
Yeah, and I think there's something there too. Kylo Ren, he's sitting there with Rey, and he's completely honest with her about everything. He's not trying to manipulate. He takes his mask off, and that's what allows him to just be real in one-on-one. He's really trying to. I really picked up more and more, actually, from reading the book, which we talked about beforehand. Mm-hmm. You guys read the ancillary material and know some of that. I do think, there's a line in the book where he says, "It is you." And if you know stuff like that and then watch the film again, you realize that, he's in her head and he's saying things like, you always dream about a water planet with an island.
You imagine an ocean.
Every night.
A night in waiting.
And there are, I call it the Arthurian legend planet, because there's, when they get to Maz's, it just looks like, a
bustling cantina in the middle of the woods. I still haven't wrapped my head around
where nobody parks their ship.
There's no ship.
I was amazed at how nice the parking was. Han clearly got the handicapped spot, which I don't know if because you're a senior citizen, you get a placard or something, but...
there in the Art of Book, there was a really cool design, and it was a coastal city, and it felt like a pirate cove. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a great missed opportunity. There's some missed opportunities when you watch the movie. You're like, why didn't Captain Asma, as I call her because she does nothing, why didn't Captain Asma fight Finn on Takodana? You know what I mean? It could have easily been her who said, traitor.
No, actually, you know what? It was, who was it? Dennis, you, and Christian Ray Schnepp, too, has pointed out several times, what would have made Phasma 10 times more interesting character? Just replace that one trooper with the
and
the
all
Force
she
baton.
has to do is say, like, are you kidding? Seriously? I'm the one who trained you, boy. Yeah. And then so now the troopers are trained to use these weapons, because in case Luke comes back or you find Luke, you have to be able to contain and detain. And then he gets his butt kicked by her, and then Poe shows up. There's like all these little things, I can pick up where ADR was put in. Han Solo says, I saw him, he was here. And really, then it cuts away, and you hear, I saw him. I saw our son. They add that in just for clarification. And so you can see where in the post-production process, they probably had their feedback from screenings and said, we need to make this a little clearer here, or we need to reinforce this. So you pick up on those kind of narrative things. Then you realize some of them are omitted from the book, and the book sometimes is, in honesty, the book is probably the worst of 7 adaptations. Not that it's poorly written.
Right.
But they didn't really give it the room to flourish it more, which I was hoping when I read it. So I read it for you. There's only a few extra beats. You find out how Poe gets off the planet, which I thought was another beat where I was like, why does no one care that Poe's still alive? He kind of is like, hey buddy, nice jacket. It was like a little underservice, but these are like normal minor gripes with the movie I absolutely adored. But I do think there's a lot of room for it to go either way. Every time I watch it, I was like, are they trying to say she could still be Solo? Because in a way, what's omitted and when they cut, she could be. Because Leia or Han wouldn't want to tell her who she is, because last time they put that burden of legacy on a character. Look what happened to their son. So there's that evidence. There's the Rey as a Skywalker evidence. And there's even maybe the idea that Kylo didn't have what it took to kill her when he killed everybody, and he dropped her off on Jakku.
Right.
And then there's the mystery as to why Jakku is Jakku and not Tatooine, or as I like to call it, not Tatooine.
Yeah.
So I don't understand. There's certain things like that which I was so angry about before I saw the film. I was like, what is with this planet? My mom watches the trailer and she's like, oh, they're going back to Tatooine. I'm like,
Well, that's what we all said when we saw the first image. It's like, oh, well, there it is. They're going back to Tatooine.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
like,
it could have been
it's not
something
Tatooine?
as simple as like we want to use this to sell everybody that we're going back to the old school way of making the movies, like the classic trilogy. We're using real locations. We're using a sandy planet, but then also make it new for Star Wars fans like us.
You could have made the sky
consume it.
like a little bit lavender. You could have made the sand a touch blue. You could have put oxidized rocks just to differentiate anything. You have all these
missing
great
was a
artists
sand crawler.
getting
That was
together
it.
to design these planets, and they're like, it's gonna look like this.
Well, let me ask you this, because there are two obviously big questions. You're touching on one, but I'll ask you both. Start with this. So, is Snoke Darth Plagueis?
No, I don't think so. I think Snoke could be potentially a celestial, one of those guys from Mortis
Right.
who lives longer. I think there was some clue somewhere that said,
He's messed up.
He's
His
been
head-
watching things for a long time, and I think he's maybe outside of the Jedi, Sith, dogmatic, simple, light, dark.
Right.
Maybe there's something more to him. Maybe he's been around much longer. The age is clearly there. Battle damage, but it looks like it's old stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's anything from like a conflict.
I
with
just
Luke.
noticed the damage in the cheek, too. I always noticed the big, scar down the head.
He
This
very
last time
well
I saw
could
it.
be. But then you have Lawrence Kasdan saying, what's a Darth Plagueis? And you have
Right.
people that work at Lucasfilm kind of denying it online. And I don't think they need to go back to that wheelhouse, but potentially he could be someone who was further back in the Sith lineage, deviated, and Sith went a different direction, and then he resurfaced now, because why not now? Yeah.
See, I went into the movie 90% convinced that Snoke was going to be Plagueis. And then coming out of the movie, that night when we came out into the freezing cold of Hollywood that night,
cold.
That was a cold night. But when we came out, I was almost maybe 5%. And then other people started to convince me otherwise. And then what kind of put me back on to leaning towards that he might be Plagueis was actually a passage from the novelization when he talks about that moment that Vader could have killed the son. He could have killed the son, and then everything would have been fine. That almost kind of pushed me back to, well, maybe he is Plagueis who's been watching. But your explanation, too, is that maybe he's outside of that has been an observer of all this from more of a
Potentially, because
distance.
if he is Plagueis, it almost undercuts Palpatine, and then ultimately undercuts the sacrifice of Darth Vader and the fulfillment of a prophecy and a balance. Because if there's somebody greater waiting and he's just balancing that little thing, then it's really about this bigger thing. I mean, they could do that, but it does have ramifications on the greater myth and how we perceive the other 6 films. So, you know what? If Rey is not a Skywalker or a Solo or anybody, which I don't know if there's some evidence for that, but if she's nobody and if she is another Force birth, like a virgin birth of the Force produced her, in the same way Plagueis may have manipulated the Force to help stimulate the production of Anakin as a natural Force birth. Maybe if she's this new thing, because there is a line in the book too, which after Kylo Ren says it is you when he's fighting her, and he says, let me train you in the ways of the Force, and something awakens in her, and I think she was probably previously trained. Is really what I'm feeling with Rey is
I believe that too.
She was previously trained. She was dropped off, and either Luke couldn't be the father he needed to be, or Luke knowing that the First Order's all over him, Snoke is all over him, Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren, wherever they are all over him. He's got to get back to the core of what it is to be a Jedi. He's got to get the answers as to what the Force was, what the balance is, what was it asking. He goes to find this original temple, and obviously he can't take her with him. So there's those type of... there's just, it has so many questions. That's what's great about it. There's so many ways to go with it. But like you're saying, killing the father, and Han had the opportunity to kill the father too, and he doesn't. To kill the son, and he doesn't. But there's a line after he says, "It is you," in the book, and he says, perhaps Kylo Ren was right about who the girl is in the book. And you're like, so maybe there's that familial connection that Kylo has to somebody that also... Palpatine was a step behind Vader on how he was perceiving and interpreting and sensing Luke.
Right, yeah, he was.
And potentially this is a repeat of that, since there's a lot of repetition, as Kylo Ren is a step ahead of Snoke in terms of his sensing this awakening. He doesn't want to tell him because there's this family connection. Even in the book, again, she says, and I'm taking the book as canon because Lucasfilm puts it out, and I'm sure they went through every line of this. But he also in the book says that she says something to him that how does this guy know even more about myself than I know? And it seems like a lot of things were so familiar to Kylo once he went into her head.
Right. See, I've kind of developed a theory myself. I still don't think she's Luke's daughter. I think there's a few things that lean away from that. I mean, there's a possibility Lucasfilm hasn't even decided whether she's Luke's daughter or not. But
yeah.
But one of the things I've become more and more convinced of is something that you were saying is that I absolutely believe she was being trained at some point. At some point, she was being trained, and I believe the Force is trying to bring her back to Luke.
That's the awakening.
She is. I mean, one of the things that I realized, like my second or third, and smarter people than me probably realized it the first time. It took me like the third screening to go, wait a minute, she's not just a part of the awakening. She is the awakening. She is the awakening in the title, The Force Awakening. And that Snoke is referring to and says, there's been an awakening. Have you felt it? It's like the Force she's starting to embrace who and what she is. So still two scenes I can't stand in the movie. Still two scenes I cannot stand in the movie. Do you remember what they are?
One stars me, and you're not a fan of that one, which I think is great, and it gets better with repeat viewings. And then the other one, I'm trying to think of, like, I'll start with mine really quick. Just the one thing that bugs me after all the repeat viewings is that R2-D2 is in low power mode ever since Luke left. It just comes off as silly to me. Plus, it's R2-D2 who saved everybody's ass in the galaxy multiple times. I refuse to believe that just because Luke went off, it's not like you can program a droid to be like, I'm just going to go into, screensaver until somebody Force sensitive comes back into my immediate whereabouts. I just didn't buy the way that was pulled off in the movie. There would have been no problem with R2-D2 just being able around servicing whatever the resistance needed at that time. They went with it a different way, but that's the only thing that bugs me. So
it was sad
because R2 has the piece in him.
Yeah,
BB-8 has the piece. Yeah. R2 has the map. BB-8 rolls up to R2, knocks on his door. Nothing happens. But yet they're in the proximity again, and then it awakens. So it has to be something remotely triggered. It has to be Luke sensed it and said it's time.
Or it's that Rey is Luke's daughter and shows up on the base, and then R2-D2
is not Force sensitive.
Yeah.
R2 wouldn't know. Wait a minute, I sense that.
But R2 was. It would be R2-D2.
R2 could have met her before or know who she is, and
right, but she wasn't in the room.
She was on the planet.
But she was on the... Yeah, that's what... Who knows?
He's not forced. It's not... I think it's...
So many questions.
Luke has to have remotely done it. It's also... They're going to just probably never explain it. They're going to just say it's a movie and it works.
That it's low power mode. And that's fine. It did have a Star Wars-y feel. I just thought it was just a little out of place with how great the rest of the movie was. You have problems with a couple scenes, though.
Well, yeah. Well, there's the only one real full scene, and that's the whole... I really could have done without most of the stuff on Han's freighter. Like the CG-ness of the Rathors.
That was practical. Everything in this film was practical.
Everything was 100%.
There's no CGI in this whole film. Didn't you go to Comic-Con?
Do you see JJ's thing? All practical effects.
This is a documentary.
It's a documentary. So that whole thing I probably could have done without. Although one of the things was you the first one to point this out to me. That first shot of the Rathor when it breaks out and it's spinning and rolling like BB-8 coming down the tunnel. That whole shot is an homage to the Indiana Jones shot with the boulder, because I knew right away. I think you were the one who pointed this out to me.
Yeah, that's the way I took it.
When I first saw that scene and I saw Han's reaction, the way he kind of flaps his arms like this, and then the way he turns his shoulders before his head, then his head, it's like, I always like, that looks familiar. What was that? And sure enough, I went back and watched that scene again last night from Indiana Jones, and it was Han's. It was the same reaction that Indy had to it. And I thought that's actually pretty cool the way they did that.
And the scene illustrated to me was it was just a great window into what Han has been up to ever since him and Leia were Splitsville. Is that this is what the life he's gone back to, and what a lonely, solitary life. And maybe it's a window into what he was doing. He wasn't just running spices, quote unquote. Is it stuff like this? It's really dangerous, and it's also you're going to get mixed up in a lot of people who aren't necessarily good human beings or good aliens. And so I like that it was a little bit of you get to peer into Han Solo. Anything that lets us know more about this character, I think it was worthwhile in the movie.
He's emotionally regressed in a way, but on the other side of it, he's the spiritual core of the movie. He's that character.
Oh, he really is.
The character that dies at the beginning of each of the trilogies. The spiritual anchor, Qui-Gon dies, and at the same juncture in the film, Obi-Wan dies at the same juncture in the film, and Han dies. So But I did like that sequence, but I know what you're saying. Not that it's superfluous, but you could have inserted almost anything into it. What was important is Han was going back to trash talking and swindling and lying and running away from the emotional reality, the repercussions of everything that he's a part of, which he's very good at. And he needed to be jolted back into it. There was also an element like Phantom Menace to it, where it was like there's always a bigger fish kind of thing, again happening at about the same time, where like they get swallowed up and then these other people come on. I do think though the one thing we were talking about too, that you were talking about, there's an idea of legacy, and you were saying maybe not Luke, maybe not any Skywalker solo daughter,
right?
But Snoke is so preoccupied and hell-bent on Skywalker. That's everything the First Order's doing. And someone, I was getting into a little back and forth with some Lucasfilm people on Twitter, and they're all saying, no, there's no relation. Why does she have to be a Skywalker? Why does it have to be special? And you get those rhythms we're talking about. You get those repeats if it is. But very importantly is Snoke will do anything to not let Skywalker back into the fold.
Right.
Snoke has done everything to make sure a Skywalker offspring is in the fold with him.
Yeah.
Heritage and legacy are everything to Snoke. And the awakening, you give me this girl, he knows, or she may be this other missing thing on the chessboard that he needs to find or knows about. So I do think legacy is a big part of it, and heritage. And look, he's willing to blow up Dequan without ever knowing where Luke Skywalker is, just so the Resistance can never find him and Luke can never reemerge. It's that dire and that serious, the idea of Skywalker and legacy. And why Skywalker, it's, I don't know, what is the extra importance on him? And it's because there is something special about the descendant of a virgin birth, of the chosen one, of the balancer. There is something to that. That's what Palpatine, his whole game plan ended with, needing this person.
It's interesting, and we're seeing a lot of theories popping around online too. Like everything from, obviously a very prominent one is that she's Luke's daughter. Some people are saying she's an offspring of Ezra. Which I don't think they would tie the show that tight in.
People would be like, Ezra? Yeah. In a year, I love Rebels, but it's not on the same.
Yeah, I don't think they tied that closely. There's the Obi-Wan theory, which is, at first I completely dismissed. Yes, you'd have to do a hell of a lot of explaining.
Do you do that in Star Wars?
They might be talking about an Obi-Wan anthology film. And that's I completely dismissed the Obi-Wan theory.
If they got that out, if that was coming out instead of Rogue One, and you'd be like, "Oh, Obi-Wan, we know on Clone Wars he had a relationship with," or she's just like every other Jedi in the history of the galaxy. She was just born. Born with it. But innately, if there's nothing special about her, what makes her, after 20 minutes of being awakened in the Force, why is Kylo so aware?
Oh, I agree.
She's going to grow that rapidly in power. It's not like any other Force sensitive's ever done that. They've been able to live amongst us, but he knows she's going to grow so fast now that he's tapped into her head and unlocked something. He knows what he unlocked. That's why he leaves the room. He's like, oh no, I got to go talk to Daddy up there. I got to go talk to Snoke. Something happened. Something bad happened. So, and the reason in the original trilogy they're not talking about, well, Luke, you're kind of one of the hopes. We do have Ezra, we have Kanan's around, and there's Ahsoka. No, you're the only hope, because you need a Skywalker to get it done. That's the only person that's ever really going to step up and face Vader and take him down and do this. That's why they can tell those point of view truths. So I really think she has to have something more to her. And if not, they can explain it, and I'm sure they'll find a good reason. It'll be an enjoyable movie. But I think there's a missed opportunity if she's not. There's something about Vader and the legacy. And like I said, I would love to see Vader's helmet back. Kylo Ren loses his helmet, and he still has one sitting on his ship that he can go...
Just need to,
bring parts
heat it up and bend it a bit.
Every time I see Vader's helmet in the movie, I'm just looking for are there actual bits of skull in there? And it's like, nah, I just see the metal.
I caught that
chrome it
last
out.
time.
He could chrome the thing out.
He could.
He could West Coast chopper the hell out of that. Make it something really good. So that's I hadn't heard that theory or that
Flames
idea.
Can come out of the sides too.
He does need a mask. Yeah, you could paint it.
See, I'm of the belief right now that I still very much, because of the whole Maz Kanata discussion and dialogue, I still feel pretty pretty leaning towards the fact that she's not a. I'm not gonna say not a Skywalker. I'll say not a Luke Skywalker daughter. But one of the things I think most of us will be in agreement on is that there is a history there. I think she was trained by Luke at some point. I think there has to be a connection.
There's a lot of implied
yeah.
lineage and history. They're not saying who, but it's there. So if they're doing it and there is none, they're just doing it to throw us off. And then I'll look back at this movie and feel like that was a little cheap.
Which Star Wars does love to do, though. They do love some clever misdirection. And a couple times in this film, it'll cut away right before we're about to get an explanation as to who she might
Who's
be.
The
like,
girl?
It's like, no. It's like, did this movie really want to tell us about Finn meeting these guys and trying to go to the Outer Rim versus who the hell this person is? It's like, well, yeah, that's all intentional. So if I had to bet a lot of money on this, and I've had 2 beers in me, and I'm in Las Vegas, and I'm looking at the board, I think the odds-on favorite is still her being Luke Skywalker's kid, so that's what I'm going to go with.
She's classified. She even says it's the BB-8.
Mm-hmm.
He's like,
See, I thought that was a joke.
I'm classified
I
too.
thought that part was a joke.
A joke, but there's another meaning to it.
Because at this point, she doesn't even think Luke Skywalker's a real person. She legitimately thinks he's a myth.
Like, I really think the opening line of the movie is a diss to the prequels. I know a lot of people saying, "Oh, maybe not."
We talked about that on Movie Talk today. Actually,
the line almost doesn't make total sense in the context of
by the way,
the
we're
rest
talking
of the scene.
about Max von Sydow's line. This will begin to make things right. That's the first line of the movie.
And JJ talked about it on talk shows. He was like, the first line of the movie, the first word of the movie is this. You know, they're trying to draw attention to it. And I do think there's something about that. I know the people making it were not fans of the prequels. I know they're not even fans of special editions. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was like one of those subtle digs, but cheeky. You know what I mean?
So if you're George Lucas watching this movie, the time to go to the bathroom is right after the crawl text. Just go relieve yourself and come on back.
Come on back, yeah.
Now, look, I said we would get to your guys' mailbag questions, so we should probably, because we got a bunch of them lined up.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is that we can go ahead and jump into it because the first question really mirrors
Let's do that. Let's jump into the first question, guys.
What we were talking about, because Zach writes, I've been a huge fan of you guys since the first Force Awakens teaser trailer came out, and have watched every Jedi Council and movie talk since. My question is, would you rather Rey be the daughter or granddaughter of an existing Star Wars character like Luke, Han, or Leia, Obi-Wan, or would you rather her parents be people of which we have never seen before? Thanks, and keep up the great work. It's hard for me to say preference.
Well, yeah,
because
preference. Look, I think because I'm so immersed in the world, I think I would like to find out there's a connection to somebody. Damn, I don't know.
I want a connection, 100%. I think
Yeah.
it deepens it. It adds, it goes, then you have these reverberations when you go back and look at the other films then, if there is a connection. If there's not, all they're trying to do is go back and say, oh, we hate midichlorians. We don't like all this stuff. Jedi biologically understanding themselves, God forbid they understood who they were. They're just going to say, oh, it could be anybody again. They just want to put that idea on where Luke could be anybody in 1977. There's no one special. But that has been modified, and it's been nuanced, and we know he's the son of somebody special. And furthermore, we know he's the son of somebody who's a byproduct of the Force itself. So if you're going to have her be nobody, it has to be done in a special way where it says something.
No, I agree.
And if she's going to be somebody, then I think there are these great, great layers that are added to the pre-existing saga. The previous 7 films will then be modified and enhanced and enriched because of it. And then you can do all these parallels. So I think mythologically it's much stronger if she is, look, the saber's calling to her. The reason Kylo wants that saber is because he knows if he touched it, his connection to Darth Vader that he talks about is because he touched the mask. I think he had a similar vision. So Rey touches that saber and she gets that vision. It would have been slightly different, but it would have been a vision almost just for him.
Right.
That's why he's hell-bent on finding that. That is mine.
He's obsessed with Vader.
Yeah, which, I mean, he loves Vader memorabilia, which also might be why he's
so
trying to...
why is it calling to her, though? I think everything's better if she's tied into it. And then Luke is running away from something. It even makes Luke's detachment stronger, that he had something to be attached to, more than just the idea of a resistance and fighting all this stuff. But he actually runs away from being a parent in a sense. And he's a bad parent, just like Anakin's a bad parent. I don't know. And then it makes it that much stronger when you have the Force Ghost. And they have to be in this movie.
In episode 8.
They have to. This is the third act of Anakin Skywalker's life.
I think that's what that Force Vision scene was
they
about.
Set it up.
What was hinting us that we get to see movie. Yoda.
And it doesn't
Obi-Wan.
matter if you don't like Hayden Christensen. You have to have it there. And I think all these things pointing towards where this needs to go makes it even stronger case that it needs to be an offspring.
Remember, Obi-Wan speaks to her in the vision. When he says,
Yoda.
Rey, you're taking your first step, mimicking the line what he says to Luke, and like you've taken your first step to the
deleted line, the deleted stuff from the movie that was shot was she actually in that corridor on Cloud City, she looks down the corridor and sees Vader chop off Luke's hand. Because up until the very end of production, the hand with the saber was planned to be in the film.
Right.
And that it's all Luke. Why is this Luke so important to her?
Well, I think my theory on that has always been, and still is right now, is that the Force is very strongly trying to draw her to Luke. Now, whether that's because of lineage, whether that's because that's where she was originally and she was being trained there by Luke, or whether it's because I don't believe she's just a brand new piece of the puzzle to the board. But if she was, then I still think the Force is desperately trying to push her and her whole life. Because remember, Kylo's looking into her head and he says, you've imagined an ocean. I see the island, so I think her whole life the Force has been trying to lay the seeds in her to bring her back to Luke Skywalker. So
that's why it's not random. That's why it's
I
not
don't
like
think it's completely
not like
random.
she's in the right place at the right time character. This thing fell on Jakku and she happened to get involved in the mix, and there it goes. They already are laying the groundwork that this is something that's been ingrained in her forever. She gets dropped off there for a reason.
Yeah.
She gets awakened at the end by him saying, I'll train you in the ways of the Force for a reason. And she's always had this vision of where Luke is for a reason. This is not by random events that Finn crashing near her house brings her into it.
let me ask this then to both of you guys. Let's take her being Luke's daughter off the board for a second. Because I believe you, if you're in Vegas right now, that's the top of the board.
Yeah.
Right.
If you take that off the board, though,
Force birth.
is that what you think is the most likely?
I can't wrap my head around
It's
her being
not
nobody
unprecedented.
unless they're just trying to be cool and hip or something and be different and say, anyone can be a Jedi again. Let's send Jedi Academy at Disneyland. It's the only reason you do that. You just weaken the mythology otherwise.
Right.
And you just say, everyone's empowered and everyone can be a Jedi. Cool, okay, but you didn't really help service the other 7 films.
So you're going to go Force birth.
What
do you think is most
I just look forward to
next
hearing
likely?
at Disney Star Wars Land, Mark, you're too old to join the Jedi Academy. I am going to say that if it's not Luke's daughter, I think it's something that wouldn't be unprecedented in Star Wars, is that much the same way where you look at where Luke came from, which was a good character, then went to evil, is that she could be somebody who was birthed from a darker place and then came out. Now, I don't know who that is. I don't know who's producing that offspring. It doesn't make a lot of sense for somebody we already met. It doesn't really make sense that somehow Snoke was involved or Emperor Palpatine, but maybe something else, some darker force was what created her, and she actually was the light that came out of that, which is one of the reasons why she was hidden. So,
which would be an interesting juxtaposition against Ben, who was like basically born to the light side,
Right.
with Leia and Han, and drawn to the dark.
So she's kind of
afterwards. So that would be interesting.
It would be very musical, but it also I don't know how they would make that make sense. But
No, I
I mean,
agree,
I stick to my initial things. Like, I might prefer her to be Luke Skywalker's daughter, but whatever, I have so much faith in this story group after seeing this movie that they could make her Admiral Akbar's niece, and I'm like, yep, all right, that's her. We're good to go.
As long as it doesn't require a lot of explaining.
We don't want to go back to the prequels, which I don't have as big a problem with as some other people on the show, but it's so much expository stuff that we just want to see more action, that we don't need that long scene.
George is a much more linear, cleaner storyteller. JJ's trying to do a lot of, we'll surprise you here and we'll throw you here, and A New Hope is a drama. If you really look at it, he's like, you need to come to Alderaan, and no, I'm not going to Alderaan. If it was The Force Awakens, they probably would have had the Sandcrawler explode, and then like, we gotta go to Alderaan, let's go. Like that's kind of the difference in the way things are told, and it feels not in a bad way TV, but that you need something every 8 minutes happening, and maybe because of the nature of that, the style of the storytelling, they could get away with her being nobody, and it provides some more twists.
Nobody seems.
It doesn't add anything extra to me that she's nobody.
It seems like too much of a stretch for nobody. I mean, at the very, very, very least.
But a force
she has to have
manipulation,
been-
like a reaction to it, the way in the book Plagueis did something and it reacted. The way Palpatine's literally sitting at the opera hall and he's like, he even had the ability to create life itself. George Lucas is not subtle. He does that to tell you were created by the Force.
All right, we got like 9 more we got to get through here. So let's bring up the next question.
All right, Ombra Domo writes, for me, the issue of Star Wars Rebels characters showing up in Rogue One is a bit backwards. Would it be nice? Hell yes. But I think it's more likely the Rogue One characters may show up in Rebels for a few episodes before the movie comes out.
Well, we've already seen them bringing classic Star Wars characters popping up in Rebels, and I agree. I think if you're going to see connections between Rebels and the movie universe, it's going to be movie characters popping up on the show as opposed to characters from the show popping up in the movies. Now, Christian has a couple of theories about a couple of people. I don't know if I buy in, but I agree. I think it is more likely you're going to see, especially the timelines of Rogue One and Rebels come very closer than any of the other movies. So I think that it is likely we'll see a couple of Rogue One characters, if for no other reason to promote the film. So I think that is likely. What do you think?
I just, in general, just the thought of taking a character, say like Ahsoka, and suddenly grounding her in the filmic world,
right,
feels weird. I think you almost have to do it the other way around, because there's an elasticity to the cartoon and the show and the animation, not in a bad way, but it's just harder for me to then, because it's so loose, to then rein it into something so physically defined. So I think it's better if things come from the film and then are expressed in a different way in the animated series. And I think the animated series is going to run for a while. I don't think it has a short shelf life, and I also don't think you have to kill characters like Ezra, Kanan, or Ahsoka to make what Obi-Wan says true to Luke about you're the only person. I think there could be other Force users in the galaxy. And all that stuff, I don't know. It's just all that stuff too.
That's a great picture Ray put together.
Ray can't be.
Ray put a great image
Ray
together.
can't be. She's not the only other Force user alive in the galaxy in the Force Awakens era too. So, I think the show is just a good ground for them to expand on the stories of people after we've met them. It'd almost be weird to see them before.
Yeah,
I kind of want to see a live action Zeb, but I don't think it's going to happen. Plus, I don't think Rogue One is going to be as heavily involved in Force using as the Skywalker episodes have been. I think this is more going to be a war film, like Valkyrie. We got to plan this mission where people who don't have
Vader's
this magic
in it.
power.
I hear Vader's
that's the one great character from Rebels that I think is going to be in it. Is Darth Vader.
At Star Wars Celebration, they made a good point. This Rogue One is going to be a universe without Jedis.
Yeah,
this is
what Vader is in it. So
there's
a Force user.
There's a Force user,
and it's Vader at his most
Mike Tyson.
evil. He's just a pure. If you walk into the room with him, you're in trouble. There's no softness to him. There's not. That's why I like him in Rebels. So he's at his most ruthless. Yeah. So you will see R2D2 and C3PO, and we've seen them vacillate between animation, live action, droids.
But will you see R2D2 fly? Probably not going to happen. We don't think so.
All right, what's next?
Gregory Marler writes, I'm a big fan of the show and look forward to watching it every week. And The Force Awakens, at the conclusion of the lightsaber fight between Kylo Ren and Rey, it appears that Kylo's unique lightsaber is broken by Rey. Also, I feel like it would be safe to assume that Kylo's mask, having been left behind, would not have been recovered. This sounds familiar. My question is, with these items possibly no longer available to him, do you guys think there's a possibility his appearance will be different moving forward? Maybe a new lightsaber made in the final stages of his training.
Yeah, because look, the Vader helmet wasn't on Starkiller Base; it was on the Star Destroyer. So he's got that available to him. But yeah, it
was there.
Wasn't it?
Oh no,
on the
Vader.
ship?
You're right. Vader helmet was on the ship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that wasn't there.
I believe it was,
and he keeps it in the ashes.
That was so cool when he's interrogating her, puts the helmet down the ashes. But you're right. During the confrontation with Han, we see him drop his helmet. It must be a very heavy mask because it didn't bounce at all. It just hit the ground.
Maybe magnetic.
Yeah, maybe magnetic because it didn't fly off down into the shaft. But I think that and then we don't see him with it again when he confronts Finn and Rey.
He had no time to go back because the planet implodes.
Yeah, so we are probably going to see a different look for him. And man, wouldn't it be cool if you guys are right, if he decides to actually fashion his new mask on the remnants of the Vader helmet? That would be
It felt like the old
badass.
mask. His mask from this film was a hodgepodge of maybe old relics and stuff. It didn't feel brand new. It wasn't polished and molded.
It felt used.
It was handmade, or at least had some battle damage, and there was something cool about that. And
he picks it up at the Goodwill.
Who's he fighting that's giving him the battle damage? I don't think anybody. So I do really think that battle-worn look made it feel like it was old material reconfigured into this mask,
Totally
which
agree.
means there's room for him to do this again with.
He
with the
probably
Vader
scraped
mask.
his mask during one of his temper tantrums that he had on one of the bases.
I loved his temper tantrums.
I thought it was a great vehicle for the movie. I also
loved
think
it.
when he takes his Kylo Ren mask off and when he's interrogating Rey and he puts it in the dirty kind of ash, I always took that to be like that's either the end, that she's either going to be the downfall of Kylo Ren or that she's just going to be the reason why that mask is no longer around. So I think you're going to see a different look for him. How much cooler can a lightsaber possibly be? We didn't think they could do the double-sided, then Darth Maul happened. We didn't think they could do the crossguard. Kylo Ren happens. What is the next evolution or devolution of the lightsaber? Very excited to see what
I
that
do
is.
want to point one thing out, though, and I noticed this in my, I think, third screen of the movie. When he's in that room with Rey, and she goes, I'm being hunted by a monster in mask, and he takes the mask off. Like you would expect, hair all over the place. Camera cuts to Rey going, oh, and then the camera cuts back to Kylo walking up to her. Perfectly done hair at that point.
That's just the Force, John. That's the
Yeah,
Force.
you missed him off screen. He goes, whoosh, and goes
Yeah.
Just give me a minute. All right, what's next?
C. Granda writes, in The Force Awakens, Rey replies to BB-8 that she is also confidential, and she seems to be a powerful Force user. And at the end, I saw a bit of fear in Luke. Maybe I'm reading too much into his look. What if the big reveal of the next movie is that she is a clone of either the Emperor or Darth Vader, and that is one of the reasons Luke sent her away to a planet where she was isolated from the Force, because he thinks she is too dangerous.
Hey, interesting theory. I mean, that's on paper and in fan fiction, that sounds great. I don't know that they're going to really dive into cloning all that much when it comes to this. I mean, it's
they
certainly
mentioned
possible.
cloning in the film.
They do. They made a specific, and I thought it was
They
a
made
pretty
it sound
funny
very
joke, too.
easy cloning.
Yeah, well, you would think with 30 years later, the technology would be a lot better too and a lot easier.
You might not have to go all the way out there to get it done either.
That's true. That's true. But as far as Luke's look, if you watch the movie again, when Luke first turns around and sees her, he looks very matter of fact. He turns around and sees her. It's when she pulls out the lightsaber that the whole turning of the head and the welling up of the eyes starts to go. So I'm personally unsure. Well, I do believe the two are connected. I'm a little bit unsure if we saw any emotion in his face, if that emotion in his face was a response to her, because I kind of felt like when we first saw her, not much of a response, or if it was a response to the lightsaber itself. I'm unclear. I'm not discounting either one of those possibilities. How did you take it?
I took it that they were on this island and they said, Mark, give me another one. Mark, give me another one. Mark, give me another one. And every time he turned around, he was like, all right. He was like, and every time he'd do
me blue
slightly
steel.
more quizzical, slightly more surprised, slightly more stern. Every time he did variations, and they
Right.
would kind of feel it out. I mean, I'm sure they didn't get up there and say, we're only going to do it one way. This is exactly what I need. They left themselves that variation. Guys, they shot with this guy for one day. They took him to England for 5 months to trick everybody. And I knew something was up because his beard kept getting longer throughout the whole shoot. I'm like, if you're shooting a movie and you're playing a character, your hair stays the same length. So something's weird. So it all makes sense. I don't think... my big thing before the movie, before knowing what it was, my thing was that Luke was going to be a little more unforgiven in a sense. Like after Return of the Jedi, his father balanced the Force, and out of respect for that and not imbalancing, he wouldn't have trained more people, I don't think. He wouldn't have made more Jedi in the image of Jedi who were kind of wrong. No mullet braids, anything like that. He would have put down his saber and probably lived a simple life until he was forced back into it. Maybe not even told his wife and kid who he was. Went back to Tatooine and as a moisture farmer, which is what he was for most of his life. Something on the outskirts, and then was forced back in by the end of the movie in a similar way. But this, they do the roundabout way where he started an order, then they all got killed, and then he went into hiding, and then he gets pulled back in. The same basic idea, but...
The
I
Godfather
think
Part 3.
in honor of what his father did and the balancing and the prophecy and all that, I just don't think 10 years later he would have started training 20 more kids and sticking them in brown robes. It just seems to diminish what everyone did, but whatever. We're here and we're kind of at the same point, at least emotionally. I don't think his reaction was, get away from me. I do think it means that he can't run from anything anymore. It was more like that. All right, it's time. There's just something a little wild about him, though.
There is something else that flickers in him when he sees the lightsaber, though. I mean, he's like, oh, cool, hot chick. Is like, I don't know who you are. And then the lightsaber, then that's when it starts to get, and then that's when, at least in my head watching it, it's like he's piecing together who this is. But having said all this is Luke freaking Skywalker, man. He probably is sensing this is about to happen. He's standing off looking in the distance like he's enjoying his last few peaceful moments of whatever life he has led up to this point, because he knows knows that something is coming up those steps that's going to be pretty important and will determine probably the course of the rest of his life.
Why didn't Leia go herself? Since she's the one that's been looking for him, and she's the one that's always been connected to him, yet always apart from him.
Those
Responsibilities.
TPS reports are a bitch to finish.
So she said, I'm going to send the random girl?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the hug at the end.
I'm going to send the random girl? I'm going to send somebody that's maybe the person that you dropped off and you're running away from.
Right. That's another...
All these things are better if she's related. I'm sorry.
But it does remind me, that shot, though, does remind me so much. I try to think, now I already had a pretty emotional response to the film, but I remember that scene with Rey and Finn in the woods. They're facing off against Kylo. Kylo has felled Finn, and then he reaches out for the saber. When the saber started to shake and was flying by, there was 5% of my brain that was convinced that as the saber flew by Kylo, it was going to land in the hand of Luke Skywalker. And we were going to see Luke Skywalker stand there. I'm going to tell you right now, cover your ears if you're under 14. I would have lost my shit. I would have... The response from me alone, I can't even imagine what that crowd would have been like.
They would have gone
But from me
shit.
alone...
But the crowd was excited with Rey getting it.
They totally were. And so was I. I don't want to diminish
And that's her hero's
the scene
journey.
as it was.
But you're right. People would have went nuts. But...
It would have been a great WWF moment, but I think the way that they're telling the story, or what it appears this trilogy is going to go, it made more sense
Absolutely.
for her.
I'm not diminishing the scene at all.
No, but that would have been
excited.
a huge moment.
The reveal would have been, I would have
That poster would have been on my wall.
Pissed my pants.
Yeah.
Like, I would have lost all. All right, what's the next question?
Justin Fawcett writes, I was wondering, why do you think Disney moved Star Wars Episode 8's release up to May 2017? I know it will be the 40th anniversary, but surely it'll make less money with this release date.
I don't be so sure about that. There's a reason that a lot of these big blockbusters like to release in summer, because more people are going to the theaters. I don't think they're worried about competition. I don't think they're worried about a lot of things we would normally associate with that. They're putting it out when they want to put it out. And I think they probably have their strategic reasons as the reason I thought they moved it to December in the first place. Because remember, originally Episode 7 was not going to release in December originally. They moved it to that date. And it's worked out pretty well. I think they're doing okay. And I also think right now they could put this movie, Episode 8, wherever they want to put it, because they are the snowplow right now. They are the snowplow. And you're going to see other films and studios diving for cover wherever they put Star Wars right now. And
it's just throwing a grenade on their schedules. They could open this movie on a Monday in February, and it would just fucking kick everyone in the head.
Yes, it would. It would absolutely would. You're good.
He raises a great point, though, because it doesn't matter how much you're trying to escape the wake of a Star Wars movie coming out. In the summertime, there's always another train coming. There's going to be even another movie from Disney Studios, even a Marvel movie or a DC movie, something. There's going to be a lot of other things that come out, whereas with Christmas, they totally owned it because it's Star Wars versus a bunch of Oscar material movies that are coming out, so it could be very different.
It's a great window.
Movies. I mean, look at the other movies that are out of Christmas right now. You have like The Revenant, you have Joy, you have Concussion, you have The Chipmunks, you have Sisters, which didn't really
it had
to beat down Sisters. It had to outpace Revenant in its 4 theaters.
And now look at what the landscape for January was.
The task was huge.
You just keep going. So now it will reflect. It's not going to reflect poorly in our minds, but in the general public, it's going to look odd if Episode 8, which is going to have a monster opening weekend, it might beat Episode 7's record, who knows, but it might not have the weekend-to-weekend numbers that The Force Awakens did. Part of that's just going to be the novelty of a Star Wars movie back in the theaters, but I love that they did this because I could not wait 1 second longer. I'm so glad it's not 3 years. Like it used to be.
Just right. In the span of 18 months, we will have 3 Star Wars premieres in the span of 18 months. That is just nuts.
That's 3 white tuxes I got to rent.
Yeah, let's just hope Rogue One feels like a Star Wars film. That's what
I mean. Well, that's the big wild card right now, right?
Will it have a crawl?
One.
I mean, I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But even if you're, all Star Wars movie open on stars, you should do something different with Rogue One, where it's like it looks like stars, but it's really a puddle and boots smash through it. I mean, play with the idea of it if you're going to vary. But I don't think. I think you need a crawl. I think they have to.
You have a crawl.
And it also feels weird too. A lot of people aren't going to know the difference between a Rogue One or an Episode 8. Let's be honest. A lot of the average people are they're making their money on don't fully know. They're going to go, oh, new Star Wars movie, it's Christmas.
But I do trust.
Wait, that's not
That's
a
the
sequel?
job of the advertising.
I trust in the Disney marketing machine. I really do. I think if you ask anybody in February, there's going to be a lot of confusion. I think if you ask people by the time the Disney marketing machine has had a little bit of a chance to do their job, I think by the time you get to mid-November, I think most average fans will have a little bit of a grasp on what the difference will be.
It's also smart that they didn't have like a Rogue One teaser at the end of Force Awakens. It's like, let all this hysteria around it die.
I used to be.
See it.
I did too, but I think you're right. I think in hindsight, I was one of the people saying, no, you should put a Rogue One thing as a tag on a mid-credits thing, because a lot of people aren't going to be familiar with what Rogue One is. But I think in hindsight, you're right, and I was wrong.
They're going to pause the movie in the middle and be like, a little commercial break. Here's a teaser from Rogue One.
Hey, Hateful Eight just had a.
There's no Jedi in this film, but check it out. It's coming next year. All right, back to our film.
All right, what's next?
Serge B writes, "Greetings, Council, and Happy New Year. My question is regarding Poe Dameron in The Force Awakens. What do you think his role will be in episodes 8 and 9? My feeling is that he may be more important than he initially appears. Since The Force Awakens mirrors A New Hope on numerous beats, could Poe in fact be a Skywalker, or at least a potential Force user? We still don't know too much about Poe other than he hit a message in a droid like Princess Leia and has incredible piloting skills like Luke. Thanks, and may the Force be with you."
Another thing we know about Poe, because the new comics are canon, is that before he was born, a certain Luke Skywalker gave his mother a Force tree. Now, I'm not saying that I believe that Poe Dameron is a Force user. I don't think he needs to be a Force user. I'm not completely dispelling it as a possibility, especially because of what we did learn in the comics. I don't think so. I just think he's the best pilot we've ever seen in a Star Wars movie. I mean, if you really just want to go by what we've seen in the movies, he's a better pilot than Anakin ever was. He's a better pilot. I mean, just that one aerial battle sequence when they come down. I mean, he takes out 6 TIE fighters in about 15 seconds.
He also was supposed to die.
Was he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, JJ said he was really going to be in the opening sequence and then really die.
I forgot about that.
I think they made a really great movie in this, but I think they just left a lot of unanswered things. Like you said earlier, they might not know if Rey's a Skywalker or what. And I think a lot of that was put onto Rian Johnson's lap. And he's got to figure that out and do justice to these characters. They're great starts, but what are the arcs? Where does Finn go, for that matter? He got his back sliced open and he's in seemingly a coma. I think, again, and going back to the book, at the very end of the book, there's this little tender moment. Everyone's celebrating and hugging, and Poe and Rey hug, and there's a spark between them. And she's like, "I'm Rey." He's like, "I know." And there's like this thing between them, and you're like, "Oh wait, so now are they going to go into this like Twilight love triangle kind of direction?"
Poe's also a werewolf.
Oh no. Poe by the end of this movie, Finn, I should say, by the end of this movie, was securely and forever planted in the friend zone. I think that little kiss on the forehead, that's the kiss of death. A kiss on the forehead is the kiss of death.
As a guy who has a summer zone, I have a home
He
in
is
the friend
trapped
zone.
like General Zod in the Phantom Zone.
But what did Leia's kiss on Luke's lips mean? What is that?
That means George Lucas had no idea that they were brother and sister.
Not the friend zone. And then you know what? That says something though, because Lucas, not that he was making it up as he went, but he was generating these stories. What happened in Return of the Jedi and how it was wrapped up was fatigue. I mean, he was like, "I'm not doing 3 more, so she'll be the other," and they all got neatly wrapped up because they didn't want to make anymore.
Yeah.
And so the story was altered based on just real life having its toll on it. And in this, real life's going to affect these stories. You're going to pass the story on to Rian Johnson, and he's writing it, and he's going to do his own thing with it. I heard he asked JJ to put certain things in the movie or take certain things out, and JJ did not. You know, at least that's one of the things I'd heard. Like there's requests maybe to set up where he was going, and I think JJ wanted his thing to be what it was. So you can tell that not everything JJ did was to serve as 8 or 9.
Right.
In some ways,
Yeah.
But in other ways,
so.
he's making the best movie right now, and you'll make the next. And that's what A New Hope was, the best movie it could be. They scraped it together and they made the best movie they could be, and we'll figure out Empire if Empire even happens. Well, we know 8's happening, but in a sense, dramatically, they're going to be figuring it out.
I heard JJ say something once when they were talking about Star Trek, the Star Trek franchise, and somebody had asked him, like, how far ahead did you have this whole thing planned? And he said something that I thought was incredibly insightful, which was, you don't want to plan too much. You don't want to put too much in the blueprint, because at some point you have to step back and watch the movie, let it breathe, and see what kind of life it's taking on of its own, and then be flexible enough to kind of flow with it. He said, a movie is kind of in its own way is its own living thing, and you got to let it grow and develop sometime on its own. So you don't want to set up anything too strict moving forward. That's why I think the whole idea that maybe they even haven't decided who Rey is yet is a possibility. I certainly think it's a possibility with Poe that they haven't really already, strictly or too firmly mapped out where Poe Dameron is supposed to go. Because I think Poe Dameron probably turned out better in this film than they were planning. I know I certainly like Poe Dameron more than I thought I would at the beginning of the film. So maybe they're going to step back, take a breath. Rian Johnson's going to take a look at it with JJ and figure out, what's the best way for them to go now.
And I think the question of Poe is indicative of a larger question as to what are you going to do with the Resistance now that we kind of destroyed Starkiller Base? Like we've crippled the First Order more or less. We have some Force users who are going to go train under Snoke.
Where's Snoke?
Is he on Moraband? I was going to ask that. Is Snoke on Moraband?
What's the larger threat to the universe aside from all the Force stuff? Because there's all these other things that are going on.
They blew up a Death Star, but they still have a fleet. And I don't think Snoke's hanging out by himself in a retirement home. I think the reason he's not on Starkiller Base, the reason he's not on Starkiller Base is because he's firmly secured somewhere in the Outer Rim, which we know the Imperial Remnant kind of retreated into the Outer Rim. They were looking for Sith relics and all this stuff, and they knew the Emperor was very preoccupied, like Hitler was, with things, fantastical things in the Outer Rim. I think they went out there. I think there's much more First Order, and he's kind of with the majority of it, just like the Emperor wasn't on the Death Star.
Right, which is something that will also be answered about Poe too, as far as like what the story is. But I think you guys bring up a great point. Is that in sports, if you're playing basketball and your team's losing by 20, there's no 20-point shot in basketball. You can't hit one shot that gets you 20 points. You only have to make the next shot. That's what J.J. Abrams was focused on.
There were no ships on Starkiller Base.
He wasn't totally focused on just setting up something. He wanted to make a shot. And he did that. Now, all the other things he did, I think, are going to be a great setup for Episode 8, but it wasn't strictly about that. It was meet these characters, make a good movie that breaks every box office record, and then we're going to see where we can run with it.
And remember, in the first Star Wars, too, the Death Star was not the seat of power of the Empire. That was Coruscant.
Right.
That's where it was. Starkiller Base was not the capital of the First Order. They still have their own capital world wherever that is.
And when they blew up the Hosnian system, which a lot of people thought was Coruscant, it was not. It's the Hosnian system, and the Republic, the New Republic, kind of migrates the Senate around, so everyone feels loved. And what they did blow up,
kind of like the Super Bowl,
was most of the Republic's fleet.
Yeah.
And so the Resistance is all that's left, effectively, like the Rebellion, which also the Resistance is not using the most state-of-the-art equipment. That's why they're still heavily X-Wing based. I would have loved to have seen this film new fighters. I mean, something Star Wars has always been synonymous with was innovation, new designs, looking forward rather than backwards. That's why people couldn't really deal with the prequels. But George was always pushing new visual ground. And I mean, I'd like to see new ships come forward. I think the Republic probably had that in their fleet, maybe using C-Wings or D-Wings or whatever, K-Wings, whatever they're up to. But I do think the First Order is sitting out there with a massive fleet that's going to be moving in kind of like the Empire was an Empire and into all the vacuum of power now. And the Resistance is all there is between it. I would say Poe or Finn probably is going to eat it by the end of this trilogy.
They might, yeah, and Poe is going to be more than a glorified Wedge Antilles. I think he might serve as some of what Han Solo did, which we no longer going to get, because it's very hard to replace everything that Han Solo, from a charisma standpoint, brought to Star Wars. That's going to be shoes that are filled by both Finn and Poe.
You know, I find him to be more Riggs than Han Solo. As in
Maverick,
yeah, a little bit more of that. I like to carry more of that. All right, we got 5 more to get through.
We have 4 more questions.
Okay,
let's run through them quick, boys. Daniel writes, "My question is: do you think some deleted scenes are considered canon? I know there's some scenes wouldn't fit at all, but do you think there are a select few scenes that you would consider canon, such as Biggs on Tatooine and Luke building his lightsaber?"
I don't work at Lucasfilm, so I just, for me, if it didn't make it into the movie, it's not canon. That doesn't mean I discard anything that's deleted or whatever, because there's some stuff that gets deleted that still ends up in the novelization, and I'm still not sure what their mathematical equation for that is. But I only consider canon myself what is actually in the film, but there might be a more intelligent answer to that. Like
I tweeted the day they blew up canon, EU. I tweeted at Leland Chi and Del Rey, and they responded that anything moving forward, books and ancillary, are considered part of an equal canon,
Right.
a shared universe. So now everything's on an equal footing, which has it's a double-edged sword.
Where does deleted scenes come in?
And, well, this is where it factors in. The NPR stuff, not necessarily canon, but the adaptations of the films are canon in instances where they do not directly conflict with what's on screen. So Obi-Wan talking about
canon.
a duck, or Ben and Owen being brothers, things like that, no. But if they're in the books, yes. So therefore, deleted scenes, like there's a lot of material where Kylo Ren finds the Millennium Falcon crashed on the snow planet, on Starkiller Base, and he goes in with snowtroopers, and he sits in the cockpit.
Which we saw that picture floating
Yeah,
around
and
months ago.
there's Kylo Ren in Vanity Fair with his mask off with the snowtroopers walking towards it. And he sits in the cockpit, and this is probably the ship he grew up in, and there's he has this weird experience before he encounters Han, and then he sees, the X-Wings flying overhead towards the battle. It's in the book. It was a scene that was shot. I'm sure you'll see it as a deleted scene, but it's in the novelization. It's not consequential, but I'm sure that's canon.
Right.
Luke building the saber. I don't know specifically where they stand on deleted scenes, and I'm not recalling. It is in the book, right? I know it's in the radio drama.
I can't remember that.
It's in the
being
radio
book.
drama,
Is
but
it?
I'm trying to remember if it's in. I haven't read.
I mean,
that
we do
adaptation
know
in a
we
while.
can assume that he did build his own saber, or whether he didn't get it at Target, like he had to buy it himself.
It's not like Shadows of the Empire where he put it in a Betty Crocker oven and he made the crystal.
Right,
That was
right.
horrendous.
Yeah, as long as the Wampa pen can be considered canon, I'm good.
Yeah.
All right, what's next?
What's in this room? A bunch of Wampas. Shit. Dylan Payton writes, "Hey guys, most people would say that Disney and J.J. Abrams made a smart decision by keeping The Force Awakens as secretive as they possibly could. How should Disney approach the marketing for Rogue One or Episode 8? Should they be as secretive? Thanks, and may the Force be with you."
Part of that secrecy was JJ is notoriously secretive about all of his projects. He really is. As a matter of fact, there weren't any set visits for press for Star Wars The Force Awakens.
Just Kevin Smith.
Yeah, just apparently Kevin Smith, who gets to pass all this stuff. But I've been told that there would be set visit stuff for subsequent movies that JJ isn't directing. So I believe, look, I'm really happy I went into Star Wars The Force Awakens as much of a blank slate as I did. Obviously, before the movie comes out, I'm chomping at the bit to find out everything I can, obviously, because I'm a fan. But having seen the movie, I walked out very happy I knew as little as I did. I think Lucasfilm would be wise to be secretive. I don't think they're going to be as secretive because, like you mentioned before, this episode 7 was the pilot episode, if you will, of a brand new series. And I think there was more of a need to keep that as under wraps as possible. But now that we know this new universe, we know the new players in the game. I mean, don't release in a trailer, Rey is actually the granddaughter of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Don't do that. But
The same classy type of teasers and trailers, which don't tell you enough, but they conveyed things emotionally, and they gave you a vibe for the world and the tone.
Yeah.
It's not traditional trailers where it's like, we're cutting it, we're going to let you know all the way through the third act. I think that's dangerous. I think they do need to have a very strong presence, both these films, to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. And that's a big task for Disney, to let the average person know the difference between a Rogue One and an Episode 8. I do think if we knew a year ago that there were as many comparable beats in terms of us, a base and a girl on this planet that leaves the planet, you know what I mean, that goes on this hero's journey just like Luke's, and there's a super weapon, fans would have probably gone crazy a year ago and said, what, it's just a reboot, blah, blah, blah. They kept it secretive, and that's fine. And then you let people experience for what it is, which is these are echoes and reverberations and symphonic play on the familiar myth. I think that's important, that the secretiveness of it allowed us to experience it like you didn't know much about it. On the other hand, I don't look at spoilers like spoilers. I look at them as Star Wars treats. I go online, I get Star Wars Christmas every day because I go find spoilers. I'm learning about the Star Wars story. There's nothing, it didn't spoil anything for me. A spoiler
I'm the
assumes
same
you're
as
rooting
you.
it.
I
love it. I want it all. There's nothing spoiled. I love the story of Star Wars. I don't care what medium it's delivered to me. If you put it in a Happy Meal and I eat it, delicious, I'll eat it. Just, I don't care. Just whatever it is, I want to know Star Wars. I want to taste Star Wars.
Can I speak with Mr. McDonald? Yeah. I just found out that Han's dead, and I don't want to know that.
I want the blue shake at McDonald's. They should be doing that. No. So it doesn't ruin anything for me. I think to me that's why I like the prequels more than the average, person in their 20s when they saw it. I absorbed the story as I was learning about it, and I had time to process it and think about it. I read the book before the movie. It didn't diminish anything. I think it enhanced. So the educating people, now that they've established this new time period, 30 years forward, we're forced to jump into this and go with it. I think now it's important that they do show a little more, but like we were saying, still be cryptic in terms of emotional trailers as opposed to literal plot trailers.
Right, which is Kyle's interpretation of how he feels about it. It does not give you the green light to go tweet every spoiler as soon as you see the movie and ruin it for everybody else. Right. Because a lot of people are like me, where I don't want to know anything.
Respect that, though.
Yeah.
I did it for me, but I kept it as a very personal thing and only talked about it with other people in this email chain of like 8 people. We just talk Star Wars all day.
Right, you didn't go out. You weren't sitting in a theater blurting it out.
No.
You're a classy gentleman and you smell terrific.
And we just talk about it with the people that you want to know as much as you.
Right, yeah. And I think there's not going to be a lot of secrets around Rogue One. We kind of know that story, and just there's going to be a few really dark nuggets that we do not want to know about with Episode 8. Everything else you can kind of tell us.
All right, what's next?
Aaron Lopez writes, considering Kylo Ren fully gave himself to the dark side by killing his father, do you think this makes him irredeemable? If so, can this hurt Adam Driver's portrayal of the character moving forward, knowing that he's lost that dimension and that he will only be evil?
I don't think so. Like, I kind of saw that moment he had there with Han Solo as the what I call, that was his come to Jesus moment. The same one that Luke had with Vader when he was being tempted. He was falling into his anger and his rage and fighting with Vader in the Emperor's room. That was his moment. And Vader himself, that was his moment as well. When he stood there watching the Emperor killing his son, and he looked back and forth, kind of like BB-8 a bit, like, do I go this way? Do I go this way? And his decision was he saved his son and went back to the light side. That was his moment, and then, in Force terms, he was redeemed. I kind of feel like that moment was the same moment that Kylo Ren faced. I honestly think when Han came out on that walkway and started walking up, I honestly don't think Kylo had yet predetermined what it was he was going to do. I think there was some moment of legitimate struggle for Kylo Ren as he's standing there talking to Han, and I think that was his Vader moment.
That was his Vader moment in Revenge of the Sith. That's when Anakin had to turn on Mace Windu.
Right.
And that's when Anakin went and killed younglings, and that's when he cemented a path that he could still be 20, 30 years later redeemed from, and he could deviate from. What is going to unlock him down that path? I think, like they said, he's a villain in progress, so I really see what Kylo Ren did. Like you're saying, it's a key moment, but that is more of where Anakin was when he first became a Darth. And he graduated to the point where he's like, okay, now we can complete this guy's training. Now this guy is ready to get to the next level. And he was torn because he knew he had to kill his family to move to the next level. He had to be the person who could kill the father. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so I look at that as that type of, who were the Jedi to Anakin? They were like the father figures, the mentor. It's the only person that he had in his life. They're the ones who raised him, and he rejects them and kills them. I see that as that early point in his. So yeah, there's a whole path that he can still go on to get darker and still be redeemed.
Now, but if he's not, as the question is asking, if he is irredeemable, does that diminish what Adam Driver can now do with the character? If he is irredeemable, I don't think that diminishes the character at this point, because let's look back to the original Star Wars: A New Hope. Vader bursts onto the scene, and he was nothing but evil in that one. We never even thought of Vader in terms of redemption until Empire Strikes Back came along. And he was one of the most fascinating, attention-grabbing characters that year. That just was one of the main reasons that Star Wars became as popular as it was. So I think if they went that way, and Kylo is now that's it. He's signed the contract, 20-year deal with the dark side, and that's where he is. I don't think that diminishes him. It does add interesting layers, though, if, as you're saying, instead of that being his moment in the throne room, that was actually his moment in Revenge of the Sith.
That's his formative moment.
Yeah, the formative moment. Then I think that adds more layers that you could explore at that point, because then we could be faced with more
age. He was younger. He's not the complete villain, as what Kasdan and JJ have said. They wanted to create this villain in flux, a villain in progress,
right,
and the nascent stages of a villain. So that's why I started to think, it's probably him in his early Anakin transitioning to the Darth. He's gone down this path, it still doesn't mean that like Luke can't connect to him, his mother can't connect to him. There's other characters that are still gonna be able to talk to him. That's why then Han's sacrifice has some weight, because what he did can still play into the drama of the next 2 films.
I think either way, Adam Driver is going to have a ball playing this character for however long he gets to play, because he's not fully formed. Because I know he killed Han Solo, we all hate him for that. You can go darker with this guy because he's feeling the pull to the light in this movie.
I didn't hate him for that.
So I did. I mean, he killed Han Solo.
I love Han Solo, but I thought I was so invested in that character of Kylo Ren that I was more about Kylo Ren than Han Solo. Look, Han Solo, man, like, Ben, I want to walk out on this platform with no railings. I'm gonna die.
Did you notice there was railings for the first 5 feet of the walkway,
and then
the railings disappeared?
I didn't. Yeah, it was sad, but then really, I was more about Kylo Ren's story, and I just thought it was fascinating. He's like, "I need your help to do this thing, and I don't know if I can do it. Can you help me?" I don't know.
It pissed me off because I'm walking out of the theater. I'm like, he's irredeemable, even though I love the character so much. And then you start thinking about it. It's like, well, look, he still feels the pull to the light. So this was not by any means. This was him giving into the dark side. This was not him saying fully, I am just dark side now, because he's still. I think that's him trying to do
dramatically
that. I think he's trying to kill Han Solo, so he never has to worry about feeling the pull to the light again. But that ain't how the Force works. You're still gonna.
He's gonna feel it. Yeah, you're right, and that's what I think makes this dramatically fascinating. Is because you hate him. A lot of people hate him. At the same time, if he could be redeemed, the potency of that on screen, if you could pull that off dramatically,
but it's a narrow window to do that right, man. Because you killed the guy with the leather
I think you can. I think you can do it. It's a new jacket.
How many more we got? 2 more or last one?
One more.
Okay, last question of the day.
Okay, Cody Gomes writes, "Greetings, council members. I'm a big fan of the show, and Mark Ellis is awesome." When I first saw the scene in The Force Awakens of the planet Hosnian Prime being destroyed by Starkiller Base, I initially thought it might have been the planet Coruscant because of its similar city landscape. But since this was not the case, do you think we will ever see Coruscant in these new movies? Or do you think Kennedy and company will shy away from going back to a place so tightly associated with the prequels?
No, I think Coruscant is just really tightly associated with Star Wars. I do think... Now, how major of a player the planet of Coruscant is going to play moving forward, I have no idea. But I would be shocked, especially after the destruction of that system, if it doesn't kind of become the fallback. Like, the destruction of that system was kind of like James Franco and Anne Hathaway hosting the Oscars. So what do? Next year? You go back to Billy Crystal. So I kind of feel like Coruscant is going to be the Billy Crystal of the Star Wars universe. I think they're going to fall back to it. So I do think we're going to see it. How big of a role? I'm not sure. What do you think?
I don't know if it's going to be that important, like you're saying. It was. I think the next story will get a little more character, smaller, focused. I feel like just mirroring a lot of Empire stuff, but with opposite type of twists to things. So I feel like it'll be a slightly smaller movie. And I don't know if Coruscant's going to be that important. You know, if you really look at Empire as a mold, they're out on the run. They're in an asteroid belt. They're in the belly of a space slug. Luke goes to a brand new planet. Yep. Most of the movie is not anywhere, retread or familiar. So I feel like it's going to be something new. I don't see them going there. I do think I do hope. I think that moving forward, that the people making it have the balls to not worry about prequels. You have to look at Star Wars as 6-film saga. You don't have to like the movies, respect the story. And as long as they're doing that, like, they can bring Force Ghosts in, it's okay. I'm sure under a different director, you might like Hayden more. Like, all of these things need to be embraced. So I don't think they're going to be cowards and run away from the prequels. They mentioned balance in the first 5 minutes of the movie. I don't think they're trying to totally run away from the prequels. That said, the planets they blew up looked prequel-esque. Characters are wearing very... prequel style clothing, and then they blew them up. So
I've never thought of it that way.
Watch it again. You'll see they're wearing kind of puffy,
really
fluffy clothes, and all like, "Hello, I'm a prequel character." Boom. You know what I mean? Boom. I don't know. I think they probably wanted to blow up Coruscant, and they said you can't do that. And I think they probably wanted to blow up Jakku, and they were going to blow up Tatooine. Like, you can't do that either, but that changed. So I think they have to embrace it, and if it is and if story tells you to go back to Coruscant, then do it. Not because it was prequel associated, it's in the special editions. And if you don't like the prequels and you don't like the special editions and you don't like episode 7, then get out of here. You don't like Star Wars.
I think you'll hear the C word, possibly. I don't think you're going to see a scene on Coruscant again. I think we're established. I think we have new planets, and if we go back to old planets, that's not the one that's going to be featured.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard not to at least reference it, because you have to. You're going to have to, at least in the beginning of the movie, at least for what is the status of the Republic right now? Because their current capital world was destroyed. Where are they at? And what's going on with them right now. So I agree with you. I don't think you're going to see any story arcs happening on Coruscant, or probably any one world at all.
It's probably going to say the galaxy is in chaos. That's probably going to be the first line of the thing. There's no order anymore. And the First Order is going to step into that to create order. They have the ships, they have the manpower, and the Resistance doesn't have what it takes to stop them. I think that's kind of going to be the landscape going a year later from now. So Coruscant is largely going to be irrelevant. That's a core world. I think the First Order's operating out of the Outer Rim. I think the Resistance is in more or less the mid or Outer Rim. I don't really see it being like a battle at the center of the galaxy, like at the end of Revenge of the Sith. I mean, they took it right to Coruscant. There was a battle over it. It seems like this is it's not diluted, but it's just kind of decentralized, the struggle. So Coruscant just largely being irrelevant. But in terms of ideas from the prequels, I think it's not bad to embrace the ideas of things. You don't have to just take them because you don't like the movie doesn't mean there wasn't good stuff in them.
Right. Well, folks, we were going to do some trivia, but I think we've probably gone overtime. So I think we're probably going to have to pull the plug on this. We'll get around to doing some trivia another time. That will do it for this installment, the final Jedi Council of the year. Thank you guys so much for being with us and growing with us over these years, over this year, I should say, over all these years. Over this year, it has been an incredible ride already. I know Christian would say the exact same thing. It's unfortunate he couldn't be here today. But I want to thank, first of all, our regular panelists here on the Jedi Council. Mark 2D2. Mark, where can people find you online?
First of all, huge ups to both you and Christian for letting me hang out with you guys in this cool little Star Wars clubhouse. Online, you can find me at 5150 Ellis on Twitter and Instagram. And thank you to everybody who is in the Jedi Council fan base for coming out and supporting me when I go on the road and do stand-up. Every city I'm in, you guys come out full force, and the first thing I hear is I love you on Jedi Council, and I'm like, I didn't even know you'd notice me. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys on the road a lot in 2016.
And of course, our special guest today, Mr. Kyle Newman. Kyle, where can people find you online? And more importantly, where can people find Barely Lethal right now?
Barely Lethal, iTunes, Apple TV, Amazon Prime for free. You might want to watch Fanboys. Maybe that's more relevant this month. I don't know. There's that one too. That's out there somewhere. It's probably discount bin somewhere. Online, Kyle_Newman on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook. I definitely do a lot more chatting about StarArs and these type of conversations on there. And Facebook's probably a better place to talk about something. Twitter's hard. We tried that the other day.
140 characters. It's a lot to get in.
It's hard. Very limiting. Yeah, be careful what you say on Twitter too, so I can get out to all your followers. And of course, you guys can follow me simply on Facebook or on Twitter just by following me at John Campia. Special thanks to Wendy and Dennis and Jonathan behind the cameras for making all this work, and a special, of course, thank you to you guys for being a part of this. So that'll do it for us, guys. Thanks so much for joining us, and until 2016. May the Force be with you, always.
Hey guys, if you like this video, click the thumbs up button. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. It'll help you stay up to date with everything we've got going on here at Collider.